I want you to imagine a world where Nintendo decides to release a Breath of the Wild enhanced port for the Nintendo Switch 2. Breath of the Wild will only be about 8 years old, and Tears of the Kingdom arguably could use that upgrade a lot more than Breath of the Wild could. But I want you to imagine what the response would be from yourself and from everyone around you and from the Nintendo community at large. I personally can see a lot of people saying that it doesn't make sense to them, but at the same time, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of backlash to this new game. And my question to you is, why? If you agree with me that there won't be a ton of backlash from the Nintendo community and that people will just go, oh man, that's kind of odd, but you know what, fine, that's okay, I'll play it again. It makes sense to include the DLC and make it look better and all that. If you think that those people will react like that, why do you think that they will? Because when all of the other companies such as Sony and Microsoft re-release The Last of Us, re-release Horizon Zero Dawn, re-release all of these older games that aren't all that old, just to make it up to the new standard of a PS5 Pro or whatever, those same people in the Nintendo community and other people at large do not like when that happens. In fact, they get furious when it happens. And actually, I think a lot of people would see the same thing on the other side of the fence. Sony fans would probably call us out for being hypocrites, saying that, oh no, they don't like it when we get a new Horizon Zero Dawn on PS5, but when you guys get a new Breath of the Wild 8 years after on the brand new console, you don't complain at all. And to be honest, they have a point, and I can't bring myself to understand what that difference is. And then I started to think about it, right? Horizon Zero Dawn on the PlayStation 4 already looked phenomenal. And then The Last of Us already looked phenomenal on the PS4. They had already kind of remastered it for that console. Before then, they decided they wanted to make the graphics look the exact same as The Last of Us Part 2, so they remade it to look like that. Now, what is the audience for these games? Well, it's for the hardcore fans of that series. They would love to replay it in a much better looking style, and sometimes they love just having different mechanics, different updates to the game that maybe the developers decided to include, and just overall, people looking to play the game for the first time. This is their brand new experience that they can play it and make it look exactly like every other modern game. Nintendo is a bit different in this regard because this console will be a lot more powerful than the Nintendo Switch, but we're assuming it won't be that much more powerful, you know? Like, I'm assuming games like Metaphor and Final Fantasy will be able to run on the console, but I'm not assuming that it's going to look as good as a PS5 or maybe even a PS4 Pro. I just think it's going to be a lot better than the Nintendo Switch, which is all it really needs to be. Breath of the Wild's art style and a lot of other Nintendo games have really strong thematic identities that make the graphical fidelity not be the main focus. Mario Odyssey is another one of those games that don't necessarily run the best in terms of specs, but the art style more than makes up for that and the game looks gorgeous. Games like Mario vs. Donkey Kong and Luigi's Mansion 3 are so small in scope and scale, not necessarily overall for Luigi's Mansion 3, but every single floor that you're on is refined into its own little area. That way, they can put as much graphical power into that one area at one given time. Same thing for Mario vs. Donkey Kong. Because the game is overall just being focused on one area, and that only is one area they have to load in and worry about, they can refine that area to its core. In a game like Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild, those big areas have to be all loaded in at the exact same time, so they can't really focus too much on making it look as good as possible. It's more about them actually worrying about it running as smooth as possible in between those big areas and in between any sort of loading zone that there might be. The trade-off there is that you get to play more of the game with less loading screens, and it looks really good because the art style is great, only because the graphical fidelity is being used to its fullest to make it look as smooth as possible no matter where you are. And then the loading zones in between, whether you're teleporting or if you're going inside a Divine Beast or just any sort of dungeon within any of these games, then they can really push that game to its limits and it will look a lot better. This takes me back to my original question to you and to myself. Why is it that my gut instinct, and very likely your gut instinct, is that most people in the Nintendo community would not just mind it, but would actually really enjoy to play the upgrade? I know, speaking for myself, I would love to dive back into Breath of the Wild once more with a very full package of just having the DLC from the very start, with the game looking better and just being played on stronger hardware. I love the idea of playing that game again. And yet, I also think it's a little bit silly for Sony to release Horizon Zero Dawn on the PlayStation 5, for them to re-release The Last of Us one more time to make it look just as pristine and polished as the next game. I love the Nintendo Switch and I love all things Nintendo, so maybe I'm a little bit biased there, but I also have a PlayStation 5 and I also played those games as well. Here is why I think myself and all of these other people would not mind a Breath of the Wild enhanced port as much as we might mind some other Horizon re-release or Last of Us re-release. It's mostly because those games already looked phenomenal. Nintendo's competitors honestly have pushed the boundaries of what graphics can be to their absolute limit, and so all of the games feel the need to update themselves to that level, and I think the philosophy behind it is what makes Nintendo fans get a little bit icked out. Sony has made a lot of moves in recent history to make everyone believe that they only care about raw power. They only care about making games as good as possible, and the actual gameplay itself seems to come last. And that is just so incredibly unfortunate because I believe the vast majority of people would rather have a game that doesn't look as good as it could, but the gameplay is so much fun. People take gameplay over graphics most of the time. That is why so many Nintendo fanboys love the company as much as they do. That company has always put gameplay before everything else, to its own detriment at times, but still, having that philosophy at the root of everything you do is incredibly important. Breath of the Wild is a result of that. The Zelda team knew they had to switch things up. They had to make games differently to where they put the gameplay completely and totally first, and they had to go back to the drawing board and say, alright, people didn't buy Skyward Sword, what can we do to make this series evolve to the next step and to make it appeal to a wider audience? If you think for 1 second that the Zelda team was sitting there thinking, how good can we make this game look? How good can we make its port look later on down the line? That is just pure insanity, my friends. They definitely were not thinking that. But I can't help but think that Sony developers do think that. I think they wonder, how can we push this game to its graphical limits? How can we make this look better than ever? And they don't focus on what truly matters sometimes. And honestly, if you look back at Nintendo, a lot of people could call me hypocrites and say, well, what about all the Wii U ports that they put on the Nintendo Switch? Well, the philosophy behind that wasn't, let's make it look better and market it as such. It was just, let's put good games on the new console so people can play those good games. No one bought a Wii U, so Nintendo knew, hey, we put a lot of development resources in a lot of these Wii U games that are really good, so let's put them on the new console that everyone's playing on and loves, and let's make them want to buy those games as well. And it worked. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is by far the highest selling game on this console, 67 million units, 20 more than number 2 on that top 10 list. And actually, if you think about it, that game's success never would have happened if Nintendo decided, let's leave everything from the Wii U era behind. No. They knew gameplay came first and games come first, and people buy consoles to play games. So let's put good games on the console. What a novel concept, right? But I can already hear you typing in the comments, Ray, the Switch already has backwards compatibility confirmed for the Nintendo Switch 2. You can play all of these games already on the next console without having to buy a new version. What gives? It all leads up to this, my friends. We are being a little bit hypocritical. It's true. I hate to admit it, but it is true. If Breath of the Wild gets an enhanced port and it looks just a little bit better, not like super duper better, but like just better, solid and better. Sure, it's an improvement. Sure, people who have never played it before will be able to play it in a way that is much better than its predecessor. But still, I cannot help but say it's a little bit hypocritical for us to say to Sony over there, it's ridiculous, and then for Nintendo to do it, it's not. It's fine. That's just hypocritical. The only way I could see it not being hypocritical is if Breath of the Wild ends up looking way better, like undeniably and completely and totally better. Because if that's the case, by all means, Nintendo, go ahead and port all of the Switch library to the Switch 2, because everyone can just buy those older games for probably what would be a cheaper price and play it on the Switch 2 and not have to worry about buying an enhanced version. But for the people who want to play those enhanced versions, they can just go ahead and buy them and experience a much better looking game. That's the only way I can see it not being hypocritical, because the argument around Sony and the PS5 and PS4 ports is that the games don't look different hardly at all. Sure, it's undeniable that they run a little better, that they look a little better, but if you put them side by side, most people wouldn't be able to tell you which one is the better version. But if you can very clearly put Breath of the Wild next to this Breath of the Wild enhanced version next to each other and they very clearly look different, that is the only route I can see not being hypocritical. But if it only looks a little bit better, then that probably is hypocritical, and you know what? I think I've accepted that that's okay. I've thought about this for a long time, and you know what? It's fine. It's fine to say that Sony's a little silly for having the top of the market graphics and making them just an inch better on the PS5, but then when Nintendo does it, just to make it look about 5 inches better, because that's what it's gonna be, there's no way it's going to look as little of a difference as Sony, so that's okay. For us to have that difference is okay. I like Nintendo games a lot more than I do like Sony games, and I think the Nintendo Switch is a lot more underpowered for sure. The Switch 2 will probably be a pretty big leap, and the games are going to look a lot better. The exclusive Switch 2 games are going to look way better than the actual Switch, and that is great. But then once they enhance those Switch 1 versions, if they end up doing such a thing, then I think it's really possible for us to say, you know what, I'm going to buy it again and I'm going to enjoy it again, and people will call us hypocritical, and you know what, we're going to be a little hypocritical, but at the same time, I don't think it's as bad as Sony. It's a little bit of both. We're being a little bit hypocritical, and we are realizing that Sony's leap is not as big of a leap of what Nintendo will probably end up having. And another big difference here that I think gives Breath of the Wild a little bit of an edge is if they actually do include all of the DLC in this as one big package, because then that makes the game a lot more valuable than just having Breath of the Wild on the Switch. Not only does it look definitively better, but it has content that that game doesn't have, all for one price tag, all in one package. You don't have to buy the game, then wait for the DLC, then buy it as it comes, like you did with Breath of the Wild. It's all just right there, and it's ready to play on your brand new console. It is the definitive version of Breath of the Wild, and of course you can say the same thing for some of these other games like Last of Us. You could say, hey, that's the best version to play and that's why it's justified, but for this one, you can really say that because it has all of the DLC included for one price. So sure, it's still a little bit hypocritical, but I think it's a little bit more justified than not. It's going to be a little bit of both, hypocritical and justified, and that's fine as long as we're enjoying what we're playing and we're not going out of our way to spew hate towards other people, because I really do think that once this Breath of the Wild thing does happen, if it does happen like the rumors say they will, then Sony fanboys are going to come after us for being hypocritical, and we might have to take a little bit of humble pie there, unless you can think of an argument better than my own. So let me know down in the comments if you do think we are completely and totally justified in wanting a Breath of the Wild port. I would love to hear a potential argument that completely blows my own out and makes me not feel like I'm a hypocrite anymore, because that's not necessarily a fun feeling. Thank you for making it to the very end of this video. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Join my membership program if you want early access to videos, access to Discord servers, fun badges next to your name when you comment on my videos. Thank you for considering supporting myself and the channel at large. If you want more Zelda content, click on the left side of the screen to listen to my Tears of the Kingdom rant. And if you want to know exactly why I think there's going to be a Breath of the Wild enhanced port, click on the right video. I hope you have a phenomenal, blessed day. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk. I have been Ray, and I will see you all in the next video.